The classroom clock ticked past 9:15, each second stretching longer than the last. 23 children sat at their desks, some fidgeting with pencils, others whispering about recess, but one child remained absolutely still. Emma Chun, 7 years old with dark hair pulled into a neat ponytail, perched on the very edge of her wooden chair, as if the seat itself might burn her. Her small hands gripped the desk's edge, knuckles white, body tensed like a coiled spring ready to snap. Mrs. Patricia Holland had been teaching second grade for 17 years, and in that time, she'd learned to read children the way others read books. She noticed things. The way Tommy Anderson always tugged his left ear when lying. How Sarah Mitchell's breathing quickened before she asked a question. The subtle shifts in energy that revealed anxiety, excitement, fear, or joy. But Emma's behavior had become something she couldn't quite decipher, a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit any pattern she recognized. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows, casting geometric shadows across the floor where dust particles danced in the golden beams. Emma sat in the third row, second seat from the window, and Patricia watched as the child's body remained rigid, her feet barely touching the floor, her entire weight balanced precariously forward. It looked exhausting. It looked painful. It looked wrong. "All right, everyone," Patricia announced, clapping her hands twice. "Let's put away our math workbooks and gather on the reading rug for story time." The room erupted into controlled chaos. Chairs scraped against linoleum. Books thudded into desks. Children scrambled toward the colorful rug at the front of the room, jostling for the best spots near the rocking chair where Patricia would read. Everyone moved except Emma. The little girl stood slowly, methodically, as if every movement required careful calculation. She didn't run. She didn't skip. She walked with the measured steps of someone 3 times her age, each foot placed deliberately in front of the other. When she reached the rug, instead of sitting cross-legged like her classmates, Emma lowered herself to her knees and remained there, upright, hands folded in her lap. "Emma, honey, you can sit down," Patricia said gently, settling into her rocking chair with the day's selected book, a story about a brave mouse on an adventure. "I'm okay, Mrs. Holland," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible above the shuffling of 22 other children finding their places. "Before we dive in, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. If you enjoy educational stories like this, be sure to like the video, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and share it with someone who'd love it too." Patricia decided not to press the issue. Some children had sensory sensitivities. Some preferred different positions. She'd learned over the years that battles over sitting positions weren't worth the disruption they caused. But as she read about the mouse's journey through the forest, her eyes kept drifting to Emma, who remained kneeling, her body swaying slightly, as if maintaining balance required constant adjustment. 3 weeks earlier, none of this had been happening. Emma had been like any other student, sitting normally, moving freely, participating in activities with quiet enthusiasm. She'd been one of those children who colored inside the lines, who remembered to say please and thank you, who never caused trouble. The kind of student teachers appreciated but sometimes overlooked because they blended seamlessly into the classroom routine. The change had been gradual at first. A slight hesitation before sitting. A preference for standing during group work. Patricia had attributed it to a growth spurt, or maybe new shoes that pinched. Children went through phases. They developed quirks and abandoned them just as quickly. But this wasn't fading. This was intensifying. After story time, the class transitioned to art. Patricia distributed construction paper and markers, and the children attacked their projects with the focused chaos only second graders could generate. Emma stood at her desk, leaning over her paper, creating what looked like a garden filled with flowers. Her drawing was meticulous, each petal carefully colored, but she never once sat down. "Emma," Patricia approached quietly, crouching beside the desk to meet the child's eye level. "Wouldn't you be more comfortable sitting while you work?" Emma's hand froze mid-stroke, the blue marker hovering above the paper. Her dark eyes met Patricia's, and in that moment, the teacher saw something that sent ice through her veins. Fear. Not the mild anxiety of a child worried about getting in trouble, but the deep, visceral fear of someone cornered. "I like standing," Emma said, her voice flat, rehearsed, as if she'd practiced the response many times. "Okay, sweetie. That's fine. Your flowers are beautiful. Emma's shoulders relaxed fractionally, and she returned to her drawing. But Patricia remained crouched there a moment longer, studying the child's posture. The way she shifted her weight from foot to foot. The subtle wince when she leaned too far forward. The careful, controlled movements that seemed designed to avoid any jarring motion. Patricia stood and moved to the front of the room, but her mind wasn't on the lesson plan for the afternoon. It was cataloging everything she'd observed over the past 3 weeks. The pattern was there, undeniable now that she'd started truly looking. Emma avoided sitting whenever possible. When forced to sit, she perched on the edge, minimizing contact with the chair. She walked slowly, carefully, like someone navigating a minefield. She flinched when other children bumped into her in line. She asked to use the bathroom frequently, and each time she returned, her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. How had Patricia missed this? How had she convinced herself this was normal childhood behavior? The lunch bell rang, and the class lined up for the cafeteria. Patricia watched Emma take her place in line, moving with that same careful precision. The child had her lunchbox clutched against her chest like a shield, and when Tommy accidentally knocked into her while goofing around with Marcus, Emma's entire body went rigid. She didn't cry out. She didn't complain. She just stood there, breathing shallowly, waiting for the pain to pass. "Tommy, Marcus, walk appropriately, please," Patricia called out, her voice sharper than intended. The boys immediately settled down, and the line began moving. Patricia followed them to the cafeteria, but instead of returning to the teacher's lounge as she usually did, she found a spot where she could observe the lunchroom. She needed to see if Emma's behavior continued outside her classroom, if this was specific to her presence or something broader. Emma sat at a table with 3 other girls from class, but even from across the room, Patricia could see the child wasn't really sitting. She was perched, balanced on the very front edge of the bench, her body angled forward, her lunchbox open in front of her. She picked at a sandwich, taking tiny bites, but her attention wasn't on the food or her chattering classmates. It was on maintaining her precarious position, on keeping her body suspended in a way that minimized contact with the seat. The other children didn't seem to notice. They were lost in their own conversations, their own worlds, and Emma's suffering was invisible to them. But it was glaring to Patricia now, unmistakable and heartbreaking in its consistency. After lunch, during social studies, Patricia asked the class to sit in a circle for a discussion about community helpers. Emma tried to kneel again, but this time Patricia needed to see something. "Everyone needs to sit with their legs crossed today," Patricia announced, keeping her tone light and cheerful. "Let's practice our best sitting posture." The children complied immediately, adjusting their positions. Everyone except Emma. The little girl sat, finally, but her face went pale. She crossed her legs as instructed, but Patricia could see her entire body trembling with the effort of maintaining the position. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Her hands clenched into fists. They were 5 minutes into the discussion about firefighters when Emma raised her hand, her voice urgent. "Mrs. Holland, may I please use the restroom?" "Of course, honey. Take the hall pass." Emma stood with visible relief, moving quickly despite her usual careful gait, desperate to escape whatever was causing her such distress. She grabbed the hall pass and disappeared into the corridor. Patricia continued the lesson, but her heart wasn't in it. Something was seriously wrong, and her instincts screamed that this went beyond quirky behavior or childhood phase. This was pain. This was fear. This was a child suffering in silence, and Patricia had been blind to it for far too long. When Emma returned 10 minutes later, her eyes were definitely red. She'd been crying. Patricia made a decision then, one that would change everything. After dismissal, as the children filed out to buses and parent pickup, Patricia asked Emma to stay behind for a moment. "Am I in trouble?" Emma asked, her voice small and frightened. "No, sweetheart. Not at all. I just wanted to check on you. I've noticed you seem uncomfortable lately." Emma's face became a careful mask. "I'm fine, Mrs. Holland." "Emma, honey, I'm worried about you. Is something hurting? Are you in pain?" The mask cracked, just for a second. Emma's lower lip trembled, and tears pooled in her dark eyes. But then she blinked them back, straightened her shoulders, and said with heartbreaking conviction, "I'm not supposed to complain. I'm supposed to be good." Those words landed like physical blows. Patricia's throat tightened. "Oh, Emma, you are good. You're wonderful. But if something is wrong, if you're hurting, telling someone isn't complaining. It's being brave. Emma shook her head, backing toward the door. I have to go. My mom is waiting. Emma, wait. But the child was already gone, moving faster than Patricia had seen her move in weeks, desperate to escape the conversation. Patricia stood alone in her classroom as the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, her mind racing through possible explanations, and every single one of them made her stomach turn. She'd been teaching long enough to know when something crossed the line from concerning to critical, and Emma had just vaulted past that boundary. The fear in the child's eyes, the rehearsed responses, the insistence on being good, these weren't the markers of normal childhood struggles. These were warning signs written in neon letters. She pulled out her phone and called the school principal, Margaret Chen, no relation to Emma despite sharing a last name. Margaret, I need to talk to you about one of my students. It's urgent. 20 minutes later, Patricia sat in the principal's office, a space decorated with student artwork and motivational posters that suddenly felt inadequate for the weight of what she needed to discuss. Margaret listened intently as Patricia detailed 3 weeks of observations, her expression growing graver with each example. Have you contacted the parents? Margaret asked. Not yet. I wanted to speak with you first. Margaret, I think something is happening at home. The way she talks about being good, not complaining, the fear when I try to ask questions. This isn't medical neglect where parents don't realize there's a problem. This feels like she's been told to hide whatever is happening. Margaret nodded slowly. Document everything you've observed. Dates, times, specific behaviors. Tomorrow, we'll have the school counselor speak with Emma. If our concerns are validated, we'll need to contact Child Protective Services. Patricia left the meeting feeling both relieved that she'd escalated her concerns and terrified of what they might uncover. She spent the evening at her kitchen table, laptop open, creating a detailed timeline of Emma's behavioral changes. September 15th, normal behavior. September 16th, still normal. September 17th, first instance of sitting on chair edge. From there, the pattern emerged with disturbing clarity. Each day brought new observations, new signs of distress, a child slowly disappearing into pain and fear while surrounded by adults who'd failed to truly see her. The next morning, Patricia arrived at school an hour early. She needed to prepare her classroom, but more importantly, she needed to center herself. Today would be difficult. Today, Emma might finally tell someone what was happening, or she might retreat further into silence. Either way, Patricia had to be ready. The day started normally enough. Morning announcements, Pledge of Allegiance, math lessons. But Patricia's attention was split, half on teaching and half on Emma, who sat at her desk with that same terrible posture, body rigid, balanced precariously forward. During the morning break, Margaret appeared at the classroom door with Mrs. Susan Miller, the school counselor. Emma Chen, could you come with us, please? Margaret's voice was gentle but firm. Emma's face went white. Her hands gripped the desk, so hard her fingers looked bloodless. Why? I didn't do anything wrong. You're not in trouble, sweetheart, Susan said, stepping into the room with a warm smile that had put countless anxious children at ease. We just want to chat with you for a little bit. Emma looked at Patricia, her eyes pleading, and it took every ounce of professional composure for Patricia to give an encouraging nod. It's okay, Emma. Go ahead. The little girl stood slowly, that careful, painful movement that Patricia had come to recognize as Emma's baseline now. She followed Margaret and Susan out of the room, and Patricia had to force herself to continue teaching, to engage with the remaining 22 students who deserved her attention even as her heart followed Emma down the hallway. 45 minutes later, Susan returned alone. She pulled Patricia aside, her expression troubled. She won't open up. She insists everything is fine, that she prefers standing, that sitting is just uncomfortable sometimes. But Patricia, I saw what you meant. The way she moves, the fear in her eyes when we push too hard. Something is definitely wrong. What do we do now? We need more. We need either a disclosure from Emma or clear evidence of harm. I'm going to recommend the school nurse do a wellness check. If Emma consents, Nurse Rodriguez can do a basic physical assessment. Look for bruising, signs of injury, anything that might explain the sitting problem. Patricia felt her chest tighten. And if Emma doesn't consent, then we document our concerns and continue monitoring. But Patricia, we can't force this. If we push too hard, we might cause more harm, or worse, tip off whoever is causing this that we're onto them. The rest of the day crawled by. Emma returned from the counselor's office quieter than usual, if that was even possible. She didn't participate in discussions. She barely touched her lunch. During afternoon reading time, Patricia found the child standing beside the bookshelf, staring at the spines without actually pulling any books out, her mind clearly elsewhere. "Emma, want to read together?" Patricia offered, settling into the reading corner's beanbag chair. Emma shook her head. "I'd rather stand and read, if that's okay." "Of course it's okay. But Emma, I want you to know something." Patricia waited until the child looked at her. "You matter. Your comfort matters. Your safety matters. If something is wrong, telling someone doesn't make you bad or weak. It makes you brave." Emma's eyes filled with tears. One escaped, trailing down her cheek before she roughly wiped it away. "Nothing is wrong, Mrs. Holland. I promise." But the break in her voice said everything her words denied. That afternoon, after dismissal, Patricia watched through her classroom window as Emma's mother picked her up. The woman looked normal, professional even, in business attire with a tired smile. She ruffled Emma's hair affectionately and took her backpack. Emma walked beside her to their car with that same careful gait, and to anyone casually observing, they looked like any other parent and child at the end of a school day. But Patricia had learned that normal was often a carefully constructed facade. On Wednesday, the pattern continued. Emma perched on her chair edge. She avoided sitting during group time. She moved like every step required conscious thought. During gym class, Patricia spoke with Mr. Davidson, the PE teacher, who confirmed that Emma participated minimally, often asking to sit out activities that involved jumping or quick movements. "I thought maybe she had asthma or something," Mr. Davidson admitted. "But she doesn't have any medical accommodations on file." Thursday brought a substitute teacher to Patricia's classroom. Patricia had a mandatory district training, and while she briefed Mrs. Patterson about Emma's situation, she worried about leaving the child in someone else's care. Her concerns proved warranted. At 2:30, Patricia's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Need you back at school ASAP. Incident with Emma." Patricia's heart hammered as she made excuses to leave the training early. She drove back to school 20 minutes faster than she should have, her mind conjuring worst-case scenarios. When she burst into Margaret's office, she found Emma sitting in a chair, truly sitting for once, tears streaming down her face, while Susan sat beside her, holding her hand. "What happened?" Patricia demanded, then softened her tone when Emma flinched. "Emma, honey, are you okay?" Mrs. Patterson didn't know about Emma's situation, Margaret explained quietly. During a lesson, she insisted Emma sit properly in her chair. When Emma tried to explain she couldn't, Mrs. Patterson thought she was being defiant and physically pushed down on Emma's shoulders to make her sit. Patricia felt fury rise hot and fast. She put her hands on Emma. "She didn't mean any harm," Margaret said quickly. She genuinely thought Emma was misbehaving. "But Patricia," Emma screamed. She absolutely screamed in pain, and when Mrs. Patterson tried to help her up, she saw blood seeping through the back of Emma's dress. The room seemed to tilt. Patricia gripped the edge of Margaret's desk. "Blood." Susan nodded, her expression grim. The school nurse examined her with Emma's permission. "Patricia, there are wounds. Old ones, partially healed, and one that reopened when she was forced to sit fully. We've called an ambulance and contacted Child Protective Services. They're on their way." Emma sobbed harder, her small body shaking. "I tried to be good. I tried not to complain. I tried so hard." Patricia dropped to her knees in front of the child, taking her hands gently. "Emma, listen to me. You are good. You are so good. None of this is your fault. Do you understand me? None of this is your fault. But they said I'm being difficult. They said I need to learn to sit like everyone else. They said complaining makes me weak." The words hit Patricia like physical blows. They, whoever they were, they'd been hurting this child and then gaslighting her into silence. She'd been sitting in Patricia's classroom, day after day, in agonizing pain, terrified to ask for help because she'd been taught that needing help was a character flaw. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes. Paramedics, a man and woman who'd clearly dealt with pediatric cases before, approached Emma with practiced gentleness. They asked her questions in soft voices, explaining everything they were going to do before they did it. When they needed to help her onto the gurney, they asked permission first. "Emma, we need to move you, but we're going to be very careful, okay? Tell us if anything hurts," the female paramedic said. Emma nodded, biting her lip as they carefully, slowly, helped her lie on her side on the gurney. Even with their gentleness, she whimpered. Patricia's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. Not here. Not now. Emma needed her to be strong. As they wheeled Emma out, a CPS worker arrived, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and an authoritative presence. I'm Jennifer Martinez from Child Protective Services. I need to speak with whoever made the initial report. Patricia, Margaret, and Susan spent the next hour providing detailed statements. Patricia's hands shook as she walked Jennifer through her observations, the timeline, the behavioral changes. Jennifer took notes with the efficiency of someone who'd heard too many stories like this, her expression professional, but her eyes betraying deep sadness. The hospital will conduct a full examination. Based on what you've told me and what the nurse observed, I'll be filing for emergency removal. Emma will not be going home tonight. Patricia felt relief and horror war within her. Relief that Emma would be safe. Horror at what the child must have endured to get to this point. What happens now? Now we investigate. We'll interview Emma when she's ready, speak with her parents, review medical records if they exist. A judge will determine temporary placement while we build our case. Jennifer paused, studying Patricia. You did the right thing, noticing and reporting. Many children suffer in silence because no one looks closely enough. After Jennifer left, Patricia returned to her empty classroom. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the desks, and Emma's seat, that chair she'd perched on so carefully for weeks, looked like an accusation. How had Patricia let this go on for so long? What if she'd acted sooner? What if she'd pushed harder for answers? She pulled out her phone and called her husband, Tom. I need you to come pick me up. I can't drive right now. What happened? Patricia's careful composure finally cracked. One of my students. She's been hurting, Tom. For weeks she's been hurting right in front of me, and I didn't do enough fast enough. Patricia breathed. Tell me everything. She did, standing in her classroom as the sun set, painting the walls orange and gold. Tom listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he said simply, I'm on my way. That night, Patricia couldn't eat. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every interaction with Emma. Every time she'd let the child stand instead of sitting. Every carefully worded deflection she'd accepted. Every sign she'd rationalized away because she'd wanted to believe a child in her care was okay. Her phone buzzed at 9:15 with a text from Margaret. Hospital confirmed extensive scarring and partially healed lacerations on Emma's lower back and buttocks. Evidence suggests repeated beatings over several months, possibly longer. Emma disclosed that her stepfather uses a belt when she misbehaves. Mother was aware, but claimed she thought it was normal discipline. Both parents in custody. Emma in emergency foster placement. Patricia read the message 3 times, each word searing into her brain. Several months. Emma had been suffering for several months. How much of that time had she been in Patricia's class, silently enduring, too terrified to speak up? Tom found her in the kitchen at midnight, making tea she wouldn't drink. He wrapped his arms around her from behind. This isn't your fault. She sat in my classroom every day in pain. Every single day. And you noticed. You reported. You saved her. I should have done it sooner. Patricia, you can't see inside children's homes. You can't read minds. You saw the signs and you acted. That's what matters. But it didn't feel like enough. It would never feel like enough. Friday, Patricia taught her class in a fog. The other children asked where Emma was, and Patricia, following the guidance she'd received from Margaret, simply said that Emma was taking a few days off and would hopefully be back soon. She prayed that was true, that Emma would recover enough to return, that the child's spirit wasn't too broken. During lunch, Susan found Patricia in her classroom. I spoke with Emma's caseworker. The child is with an experienced foster family, in a home that's handled trauma cases before. She started medical treatment and will begin therapy next week. Can I see her? Not yet. She needs time to adjust, to feel safe. But Jennifer said Emma asked about you. Asked if you were mad at her for causing trouble. Patricia's heart cracked. I need her to know I'm not. That I'm proud of her. Jennifer is passing that message along. Patricia, I also wanted to tell you that Emma made a disclosure last night. She told the investigators that her stepfather beat her with a belt 3 to 4 times per week for minor infractions. Spilling milk. Making noise. Asking too many questions. Each time, He hit her across her lower back and buttocks, because those were places that wouldn't show when she wore normal clothes. Her mother would treat the wounds with ointment, but told Emma never to tell anyone because they'd take her away, and it would be Emma's fault the family was torn apart. Patricia pressed her palms against her desk, needing something solid to ground her. She's 7 years old. She's a baby. I know. The stepfather has confessed, tried to frame it as reasonable discipline that accidentally went too far. The mother is claiming she was afraid of him, that she wanted to help Emma but didn't know how. Both are facing multiple charges. Good, Patricia said viciously. I hope they never see daylight again. Susan didn't disagree. The following week crawled by. Patricia threw herself into teaching, creating engaging lessons and activities, but her heart wasn't fully in it. She kept looking at Emma's empty desk, wondering if the child was eating, sleeping, healing, wondering if Emma felt abandoned or betrayed, wondering if she'd ever smile again without that underlying fear Patricia had learned to recognize. On Tuesday, Jennifer called. Emma is asking for you. Would you be willing to visit? It might help her feel connected to something stable. Of course. Whenever you need me. They arranged for Patricia to visit that Saturday at the foster home, a comfortable house in a quiet neighborhood with a garden that exploded with color. The foster mother, Diane, was a woman in her 50s with laugh lines and gentle hands. She greeted Patricia warmly. Emma has been talking about you all week. She's nervous but excited. Emma appeared in the hallway, wearing clean clothes that fit properly and looking healthier than Patricia had ever seen her. The fear in her eyes had diminished, replaced by cautious hope. Mrs. Holland? Patricia knelt, opening her arms, and Emma ran to her, carefully but without the painful precision of before. She hugged Patricia fiercely, and Patricia hugged back, blinking away tears. How are you doing, sweetheart? Better, Emma said simply. It doesn't hurt to sit anymore. Well, it still hurts a little, but the doctor says it's getting better every day. They sat together in Diane's living room, and Emma showed Patricia drawings she'd made, colorful pictures of flowers and butterflies and rainbows. Hopeful images that suggested healing had begun. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner, Emma said quietly, her small fingers tracing a butterfly's wing in one of her drawings. I was scared. Emma, you have nothing to apologize for. Nothing. The adults in your life should have kept you safe, and they failed. But you survived, and you're brave, and I'm so proud of you. Diane says I can go back to school next month. Will you still be my teacher? If you want me to be, absolutely. Emma nodded. I do. I miss school. I miss story time. They spent 2 hours together, talking about nothing and everything. Emma showed Patricia her new room, decorated with posters of animals and a bookshelf already filling with books. She introduced Patricia to the foster family's cat, a fat orange tabby named Pumpkin who immediately claimed Emma's lap. As Patricia prepared to leave, Emma hugged her again. Thank you for noticing I was hurting. No one else did. Patricia held the child close, her heart breaking and mending simultaneously. Someone should have noticed sooner, Emma. You deserved better. But you helped me when you did notice. That matters. The wisdom in those words, coming from a 7-year-old who'd endured unspeakable pain, left Patricia speechless. Over the next month, Patricia received regular updates. Emma was responding well to therapy. Her physical wounds were healing. She'd started laughing again, playing with other foster children in Diane's care. The legal case against her parents was progressing, with prosecutors confident about securing convictions. When Emma finally returned to Patricia's classroom in late November, the other children welcomed her back with cards and drawings. They didn't know why she'd been gone, only that they'd missed their quiet classmate. Emma, wearing a purple dress and genuine smile, took her seat at her desk and for the first time in months, sat normally, her full weight on the chair, her body relaxed. Patricia had to excuse herself momentarily, stepping into the hallway to compose herself as tears of relief and joy and lingering guilt spilled over. Susan found her there. She looks good, Susan observed. She looks like a child should look. Happy, safe, unafraid. Because of you, Patricia. Because you paid attention. Patricia shook her head. I should have acted sooner. You acted when you had enough information to act. That's all any of us can do. Emma is alive. She's safe, and she's healing. That's what matters. Throughout the following weeks, Patricia watched Emma blossom. The child participated more in class, raised her hand to answer questions, played with classmates during recess. The fear that had haunted her eyes faded day by day, replaced by the bright curiosity of a child who felt safe enough to explore her world. During the December holiday party, Patricia found Emma helping distribute cookies to classmates, chatting easily with other children. The transformation was remarkable, beautiful, and proof that children possessed extraordinary resilience when given the support and safety they needed. At the end of the party, Emma approached Patricia shyly. "Mrs. Holland? I made you something." She handed Patricia a drawing of two figures, clearly Emma and Patricia, standing in a classroom surrounded by hearts and stars. At the bottom, in Emma's careful printing, "Thank you for being brave for me when I couldn't be brave for myself." Patricia framed that drawing and kept it on her desk, a daily reminder of why she'd become a teacher in the first place. Not just to educate, but to truly see children, to notice when something was wrong, to be brave enough to act on instincts even when fear of being wrong might paralyze someone else. The legal proceedings moved forward through winter. Patricia testified at a preliminary hearing, describing Emma's behavior and the timeline of her observations. She sat in a courtroom and detailed how a child had suffered in plain sight while adults rationalized away the signs. The defense attorney tried to suggest Patricia had overreacted, that Emma's behavior could have had innocent explanations, but the medical evidence was irrefutable. The photographs of Emma's wounds, the expert testimony about repeated trauma, the child's own detailed disclosure about years of abuse, all of it painted a picture that no amount of legal maneuvering could obscure. Emma's stepfather was sentenced to 15 years. Her mother received 8 years for child endangerment and failing to protect her daughter. The judge's words during sentencing echoed in Patricia's mind for weeks afterward. Children are not property to be disciplined into submission. They are human beings deserving of safety, dignity, and love. These defendants systematically tortured a child and then manipulated her into silence. Their actions represent a fundamental betrayal of the most sacred duty any adult has, the duty to protect the vulnerable. Jennifer, the CPS worker, kept Patricia updated throughout the process. Emma would remain in foster care, with Diane's family having first priority for adoption if and when parental rights were terminated. The child was thriving, attending regular therapy, maintaining good grades, and slowly learning to trust that the world could be safe. In March, Patricia invited Diane and Emma to a spring concert at school. Emma had joined the chorus, discovering a love for singing that her previous life had never allowed her to explore. Patricia sat in the audience beside Diane, watching as Emma stood on risers with 20 other second graders, her face glowing as she sang about springtime and butterflies and hope. Afterward, Emma ran to them, her choir robe flapping around her legs. "Did you hear me? I had a solo line." "You were magnificent," Patricia said, pulling the child into a hug that Emma returned enthusiastically, without hesitation, without the careful guardedness that had defined her movements for so long. Later, while Emma played on the swings with friends, Diane spoke quietly to Patricia. "She still has nightmares sometimes, still flinches when she makes mistakes, but she's healing more every day. My husband and I have started the adoption process. We want her to stay with us permanently. She's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have her. Emma is an extraordinary child. What she survived, what she endured, and she still finds reasons to smile, to trust, to hope. That's remarkable." Patricia watched Emma on the swings, her head thrown back in laughter as she pumped her legs higher. "She deserves every good thing this world can offer. She does. And I promise you, we'll spend every day making sure she gets it." As the school year drew to a close, Patricia found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. She'd questioned her instincts countless times over the months, wondering if she'd missed other signs, if she could have prevented some of Emma's suffering if she'd acted faster. But therapy, both for Emma and for Patricia herself, had helped her understand that guilt and responsibility were different things. She'd been responsible for noticing, for reporting, for advocating. Those responsibilities she'd fulfilled. The guilt belonged to Emma's abusers, not to the teacher who'd finally given voice to a child's silent suffering. On the last day of school, Emma gave Patricia another drawing. This one showed a little girl sitting comfortably in a chair, surrounded by friends, with a sun shining overhead. No hearts, no stars, just a simple image of normalcy that represented everything Emma had reclaimed. "This is who I am now," Emma explained. Not scared anymore. Just a kid. Patricia hugged her tightly. That's exactly who you should be. Summer arrived, and Patricia spent her break processing the year's events through long talks with Tom, therapy sessions, and quiet reflection. She returned to school in August with renewed purpose and sharper instincts. She'd learned what quiet suffering looked like. She knew now that the children who caused the least disruption might need the most help. She understood that compliance and silence weren't always signs of contentment, but could mask unbearable pain. She attended training sessions on recognizing abuse and trauma in children. She volunteered with a local organization that supported foster families. She became an advocate in ways she'd never been before, determined that no child in her sphere of influence would suffer unseen again. Emma thrived in Diane's care. By October, the adoption was finalized, and Emma officially became Emma Preston. The child invited Patricia to the small celebration Diane hosted, a gathering of people who'd helped Emma on her journey from victim to survivor to simply being a child again. At the party, Emma gave a short speech that she'd written herself. A year ago, I thought being good meant being silent. I thought complaining about pain made me weak. I thought no one would believe me if I told them what was happening. But Mrs. Holland taught me that being brave means asking for help. That being strong means trusting people who care. That being good means being honest, even when honesty is scary. She turned to Patricia. You saved my life. Not just because you told people what was happening, but because you made me believe I was worth saving. Thank you. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Patricia hugged Emma, this resilient, brilliant child who'd survived hell and emerged determined to thrive, and felt profound gratitude that she'd paid attention when it mattered most. Years passed. Emma grew into a confident teenager, then a capable young adult. She excelled in school, made lasting friendships, and developed a passion for helping other children who'd experienced trauma. She became a peer counselor, a volunteer at child advocacy centers, and eventually pursued a degree in social work. Patricia continued teaching, carrying Emma's story with her always. It made her a better teacher, more observant, more willing to trust her instincts. Over the years, she identified 3 other children experiencing various forms of abuse or neglect, each time acting quickly and decisively, each time thinking of a little girl who'd once sat on the edge of a chair, too afraid to ask for help. She received a letter from Emma on the 10-year anniversary of that terrible day in Margaret's office when blood had seeped through a child's dress and shattered everyone's assumptions about what was happening behind closed doors. Dear Mrs. Holland, the letter began. I'm graduating from college this spring with a degree in social work. I'm going to spend my life helping children like I used to be, kids who are suffering in silence, too scared to speak up. I'm going to be the person who notices, who cares, who acts. Just like you did for me. You taught me that one person paying attention can change everything. Thank you for being that person. Thank you for seeing me when I thought I was invisible. Thank you for being brave enough to act. With gratitude always, Emma. Patricia kept that letter in her desk drawer, next to the 2 drawings Emma had made years earlier. On difficult days, when teaching felt overwhelming and children's needs seemed impossible to meet, she'd pull out those items and remember why this work mattered. One child saved wasn't a failure because others still suffered. It was proof that paying attention, trusting instincts, and being brave enough to act could literally save a life. The story of a child who sat on the edge of her seat and the teacher who noticed became something Patricia shared in professional development sessions, in conversations with new teachers, in moments when others doubted whether their observations mattered. She told it not to glorify herself, but to emphasize how suffering could hide in plain sight, how normal could be carefully constructed to mask unbearable pain, how children learn to protect their abusers through silence. Emma taught me that the quietest children might be screaming for help in ways we're not listening for, Patricia would say. She taught me that compliance can be fear, that perfect behavior can be survival, that small signs, observed consistently, tell stories that children can't speak aloud. She taught me to look closer, to trust my instincts, to be brave enough to act even when I might be wrong, because the cost of being wrong is discomfort. The cost of ignoring what my gut tells me could be a child's life. Now, as Patricia stands before another class of second graders, her eyes scan the room with practiced awareness. She notices which children sit comfortably and which shift constantly. She watches for patterns, for changes, for the subtle signs that something isn't right. She creates a classroom culture where asking for help is celebrated, where vulnerability is strength, where every child knows they matter. And sometimes, late at night when doubt creeps in, when she worries that she's overreacting or seeing problems where none exist, she thinks of Emma, a child who sat on the edge of a chair because sitting normally caused unbearable pain. A child who stayed silent because she'd been taught that speaking up would tear her family apart. A child who suffered for months because the adults around her failed to truly see what was happening. The memory strengthens Patricia's resolve. Better to investigate 10 false concerns than to miss one real crisis. Better to risk embarrassment than to let a child suffer in silence. Better to be the teacher who cares too much than the one who didn't care enough. Emma's story doesn't end with rescue or healing or even triumph over trauma. It continues every day in the life she's building, in the work she's pursuing, in the children she'll help throughout her career. It continues in Patricia's classroom, in the awareness she brings to every interaction, in the instinct to look deeper when something feels wrong. If you've watched this story and felt moved by Emma's journey, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more educational stories that matter, and share this with someone who works with children. Teachers, coaches, counselors, parents, we all have the power to notice when something is wrong. We all can be the person who sees past carefully constructed facades to the truth beneath. We all can choose to be brave enough to act when children need us most. The simplest movement, a child perched on the edge of a chair, held the loudest cry for help. Patricia heard it. She answered it. She changed a life because she paid attention when it mattered most. That's not heroism. That's responsibility. That's what every adult owes every child. The question isn't whether you'll encounter a child who needs help. The question is whether you'll notice, whether you'll trust your instincts, and whether you'll be brave enough to act. Sometimes the biggest difference between suffering and salvation is one person who sees what others miss and cares enough to do something about it. Be that person. Every child deserves someone who will notice their silent suffering and have the courage to help them find their voice. Every child deserves someone brave enough to act when action could mean the difference between continued torment and life-saving intervention. Emma's chair sits in a classroom somewhere, occupied by other children now, but its lesson remains. Look closer. Trust your instincts. Act when something feels wrong. Because sometimes, the smallest sign, carefully observed and courageously addressed, can save a life.